Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Harmony, watching the stars streak past through the main viewscreen. His ship was one of humanity's finest diplomatic vessels, designed for peace missions across the galaxy. The bridge was clean and bright with soft white lights that made visitors feel welcome rather than threatened. "Captain, we're approaching the Vorthak border," announced Lieutenant Kate Thompson from her station. She was young but skilled, one of the new generation of humans who had grown up believing that words could solve any problem. Jake nodded and straightened his blue diplomatic uniform. For 20 years, humanity had been known throughout the galaxy as the Peacebringers. They had helped settle disputes between angry alien species, negotiated trade deals that benefited everyone, and never once fired a weapon in anger. Other races respected them for this, though some quietly thought humans were too soft for the harsh realities of space. "Dr. Rodriguez, are you ready for first contact?" Jake asked, turning to the ship's chief scientist. Amy Rodriguez was studying her tablet, reviewing everything they knew about the Vorthak Empire. "As ready as we can be, Captain," Amy replied. "The Vorthak are warriors by nature. They respect strength and honor above all else, but they also understand the value of resources and territory. I believe we can find common ground, Commander." Ryan Bell, the ship's tactical officer, frowned at his console. Ryan had joined the Harmony reluctantly. He believed in peace, but he also believed in being prepared for trouble. "Captain, the Vorthak have been expanding into neutral space for months. Their fleet movements suggest they're not interested in talking." "That's exactly why we're here, Ryan," Jake said calmly. "The Galactic Coalition chose us because we've never failed to find a peaceful solution. The Vorthak just need to understand that war benefits no one." The ship dropped out of faster than light. Travel near Kepler 442b, a world on the edge of Vorthak space. Almost immediately, 3 massive Vorthak warships appeared on their screens. These ships were built for battle, with thick armor and weapons that could destroy the Harmony in seconds. "Incoming transmission," reported Thompson. The view screen flickered and showed a Vorthak warrior. He was tall and muscular with gray skin covered in battle scars. His red eyes stared at the humans with obvious suspicion. "I am War Commander Thexval of the Vorthak Empire," the alien said in a deep, harsh voice. "You have entered our territory without permission. State your purpose or be destroyed." Jake stepped forward with his hands open and empty, the universal gesture of peace. "War Commander, I am Captain Morrison of the United Earth Ship Harmony. We come seeking dialogue with your empire. The Galactic Coalition has sent us to discuss matters of mutual interest." Thexval's expression didn't change, but he studied Jake for a long moment. "Humans," he said finally. "We have heard of your people. You are the ones who solve problems with words instead of weapons." "We prefer to solve problems without violence, yes," Jake replied. "Violence destroys what could be built together." The War Commander made a sound that might have been laughter. "Interesting. Very well, humans. You may come aboard our ship for talks. But know this, if you try to deceive us, you will not leave this system alive." An hour later, Jake, Amy, and Ryan materialized on the Vorthak flagship in beams of blue light. The ship's interior was dark and threatening, with red lights and metal walls covered in weapon displays. Vorthak warriors watched them with hostile eyes as they were led to a meeting room. The talks began well enough. Jake explained the benefits of peaceful cooperation, while Amy shared scientific knowledge that impressed the Vorthak engineers. The UAE aliens were particularly interested in human medical technology and farming techniques. It seemed that even warriors needed to heal their wounded and feed their people. "Your species has achieved much without conquest," admitted Thexval during one session. "Perhaps there is wisdom in your ways." Ryan remained suspicious, but even he began to relax as the days passed. The Vorthak seemed genuinely interested in learning about human culture and technology. They asked detailed questions about Earth's history and how humanity had moved from constant warfare to peaceful cooperation. On the 5th day, Thexval invited the human delegation to a ceremonial dinner. "It is our custom to seal agreements with a shared meal," he explained. "This shows trust between former enemies who become allies." The dining hall was filled with Vorthak officers and their human guests. The food was strange but edible, and the conversation flowed more easily than ever before. Jake began to believe they had achieved something remarkable, a peaceful alliance between two very different species. Amy was discussing Vorthak poetry with a female warrior when the atmosphere suddenly changed. The Vorthak officers grew quiet and tense. Jake noticed them exchanging meaningful looks. "War Commander," Jake said, setting down his cup. "Is something wrong?" Thexval stood slowly, his hand moving to the weapon at his side. "Nothing is wrong, human. Everything is proceeding exactly as planned." That's when Jake realized the horrible truth. The dinner wasn't a celebration. It was a trap. The peaceful negotiations had been a lie from the beginning. "You see," Thexval continued, drawing his weapon, "we needed time to position our fleets. Your reputation for peace made you perfect messengers. While you spoke of friendship, we prepared for war." Ryan leaped to his feet, reaching for his own sidearm, but Vorthak warriors were already moving. "Captain, get down!" he shouted, firing at the nearest enemy. His shot took down one warrior, but 3 more rushed him from different directions. The dining hall erupted into chaos. Tables overturned as humans and Vorthak fought hand to hand. Amy screamed as a warrior grabbed her, but she broke free and ran toward Jake. Ryan was fighting desperately against overwhelming odds, his military training showing as he took down 2 more enemies before a Vorthak blade found his chest. "Ryan!" Jake shouted, but there was nothing he could do. His friend and officer fell to the floor, blood spreading across his uniform. "Move! Move!" Jake grabbed Amy and the 3 surviving crew members, fighting their way toward the exit. Emergency lights flashed as alarms blared throughout the Vorthak ship. They barely made it back to their transport beam coordinates before more warriors arrived. The blue light surrounded them just as enemy weapons fired, and they materialized back on the Harmony's bridge with scorch marks on their clothes. "Get us out of here now," Jake ordered, dropping into his captain's chair. The ship's engines roared to life as they fled the Vorthak fleet. As they escaped into faster-than-light travel, Jake intercepted enemy communications. What he heard made his blood run cold. The Vorthak weren't just planning to attack the Harmony. They had used the peace talks to coordinate simultaneous strikes on 12 human colonies. Millions of innocent people were about to die because the Vorthak had seen humanity's desire for peace as weakness to exploit. Jake looked at Ryan's empty station and felt something change inside him. For 20 years, humanity had chosen peace over war. They had believed that any conflict could be resolved through understanding and compromise. But the Vorthak had betrayed that trust in the most brutal way possible. As the Harmony raced toward human space with news of the coming attack, Jake Morrison realized that their galaxy was about to learn something important about his species. Humanity had not abandoned their capacity for war when they chose peace. They had simply been waiting for someone foolish enough to make them remember why they had been so good at it. The emergency meeting room on Earth was filled with tension. Admiral Lisa Carter sat at the head of the long table, her face grim as she listened to Captain Morrison's report. Around her sat the most powerful humans in the galaxy, the leaders, who had guided their species through 20 years of peace. 12 colonies, Admiral Carter repeated slowly. "They're planning to hit 12 of our worlds at the same time." Jake nodded, his uniform still showing burn marks from the fight on the Vorthak ship. "The communications we intercepted were clear. They've been moving their fleets into position for weeks. The peace talks were just a way to keep us distracted." Amy Rodriguez, who had been quiet since their escape, finally spoke up. "Admiral, I studied their culture for months. The Vorthak respect only strength. They saw our peaceful nature as proof that we were weak. To them, we looked like easy prey." General Marcus Stone, an old soldier who had been fighting for 20 years to keep the military ready, slammed his fist on the table. "I told you this would happen. You can't trust every alien species to want peace just because we do. Some of them only understand violence." "That's enough, Marcus," said President Eleanor Murphy as she entered the room. Everyone stood as the leader of humanity took her seat. She looked tired, older than her 50 years. The weight of leading a peaceful species in a dangerous galaxy had never been heavier. "Sit down, all of you," the president said quietly. "We have decisions to make and we don't have much time." She turned to Jake. Captain Morrison, how long do we have before the Vorthak attack begins? Based on their fleet movements, maybe 48 hours for the closest colonies. 72 for the farthest ones. President Murphy closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, there was something different there. Something that hadn't been seen in human leadership for 2 decades. General Stone, I'm reactivating the Earth Defense Corps. You have full authority to mobilize every reserve unit we have. The old general's eyes widened. Madam President, are you sure? We've been committed to peaceful solutions for 20 years. This would change everything. They changed everything when they decided to attack our people. Murphy replied firmly. Admiral Carter, I want every shipyard in human space converted to military production immediately. Cancel all exploration missions and bring our ships home. Carter nodded grimly. It will take time to retrofit civilian vessels with weapons, Madam President. Then we better hope our ancestors built things to last, Murphy said. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at Earth's blue sky. I need to address the colonies. They need to know what's coming. 2 hours later, every human world received the same broadcast. President Murphy appeared on screens across the galaxy, her face calm but her eyes hard as steel. My fellow humans, she began. 20 years ago, we made a choice to pursue peace above all else. We believed that understanding and cooperation could solve any problem. We still believe this. But today we learned that not everyone in this galaxy shares our values. She paused, letting her words sink in across dozens of worlds. The Vorthak Empire has decided to attack our colonies. They see our desire for peace as weakness. They believe we will not fight back. They are wrong. Her voice grew stronger with each word. We sent them peace, offered them our hand in friendship. They chose to bite it. Now they will learn why our ancestors called it the iron fist inside the velvet glove. The reaction across human space was immediate and surprising. Within hours, recruitment centers were overwhelmed with volunteers. Farmers put down their tools to pick up weapons. Teachers became tactical instructors. Scientists began working around the clock to convert their peaceful technologies into instruments of war. On the industrial world of New Detroit, factory worker Bobby Liu looked at the peaceful mining ship he had been building. With a few modifications, those mining lasers could become ship-killing weapons. The cargo holds designed for ore could carry missiles instead. Time to remember what we used to build before we got civilized, Bobby muttered, pulling up old military blueprints from the archives. Captain Morrison found himself assigned to a new ship, the UES Retribution. It was officially listed as an exploration vessel, but Jake could see the truth. The thick armor wasn't for meteor protection. The powerful engines weren't just for fast travel. The scientific equipment looked suspiciously like military hardware. His new crew was different too. Lieutenant Kate Thompson had been transferred from a peaceful survey ship, but she spent her first day studying weapons targeting systems instead of star charts. Chief Engineer Bobby Liu came aboard with a grin and a toolbox full of devices that definitely weren't standard exploration equipment. Captain, Kate said during their first briefing, I've been looking at our ship's capabilities. We're not really an exploration vessel, are we? Jake smiled grimly. Humanity never stopped building warships, Lieutenant. We just got very good at calling them something else. Meanwhile, the Vorthak were moving forward with their attack plan. War Commander Thexaval was confident that the humans would surrender quickly once they saw the overwhelming force being brought against them. After all, they were a species that talked instead of fighting. The first target was New Portland, a farming colony on the edge of human space. The Vorthak expected to find defenseless civilians and maybe a few lightly armed security guards. What they found instead surprised them. Every human on New Portland seemed to know how to fight. The farmers had weapons hidden in their barns. The old teachers had turned their schools into fortresses. Even the children seemed to understand military tactics. Colony leader Frank Mitchell had been a peaceful administrator for 15 years. But before that, he had been a soldier. As Vorthak ships appeared in orbit, something awakened in him that had been sleeping for 2 decades. All right, people, Frank announced over the colony's communication system. We knew this day might come. Time to remember who we used to be. The Vorthak landing forces expected easy victory. Instead, they found themselves fighting street by street against humans who seemed to know exactly how to hurt them. Every building became a fortress. Every road became a killing ground. In space above New Portland, the small colonial defense force engaged the much larger Vorthak fleet. The human ships were outnumbered 10-1, but they fought with a desperation and cleverness that caught the aliens off guard. Captain Sarah Miller commanded the defense force from her ship, the New Hope. It was supposed to be a peaceful patrol vessel, but Sarah had been secretly modifying it for months. Her communication array was actually a powerful jamming system. Her cargo pods were filled with missiles. "All ships, this is Miller," she broadcast to her small fleet. "They came here expecting sheep. Let's show them they found wolves instead." The battle was fierce but brief. The human ships couldn't win against such numbers, but they made the Vorthak pay dearly for every kilometer of space. When the New Hope finally exploded, it took 2 Vorthak cruisers with it. Word of the battle spread quickly through human space. The Vorthak had expected easy victories, but instead they were facing determined resistance everywhere they attacked. More importantly, they were learning something that the galaxy had forgotten about humanity. Humans didn't choose peace because they were weak. They chose peace because they remembered what happened when they went to war. For 20 years, they had kept that knowledge buried, hoping they would never need it again. But the Vorthak had made them remember, and now the galaxy was about to learn why humanity's ancestors had conquered their own world before they ever reached for the stars. President Murphy received the reports from all the attacked colonies. The news was grim, but there was something else in those reports. Something that made her smile for the first time since the crisis began. Humanity was waking up. And when they were fully awake, the Vorthak were going to regret ever hearing the name of their species. 3 weeks had passed since the Vorthak invasion began, and War Commander Thexaval was growing worried. What should have been quick victories had turned into bloody battles that seemed to drag on forever. His warriors were dying in numbers he had never expected. On New Portland, the humans refused to surrender. Colony leader Frank Mitchell had turned every street into a trap and every building into a fortress. Vorthak soldiers who had conquered dozens of worlds found themselves unable to defeat simple farmers and teachers. "These humans fight like demons," complained Subcommander Krelth during a strategy meeting. "They use tactics we have never seen. They turn our own weapons against us." Thexval snarled at his subordinate. "They are weak creatures who avoid battle. How can they resist the might of the Vorthak Empire?" But deep down, the war commander was beginning to understand a terrible truth. The humans weren't weak at all. They had simply been choosing not to fight. Now that choice was gone, and the galaxy was seeing what humanity looked like when they stopped holding back. In space, Admiral Lisa Carter was leading the largest human fleet assembled in 20 years. Her flagship, the UES Determination, had once been called a deep space research vessel. But research vessels didn't need armor thick enough to stop battleship weapons or engines powerful enough to outrun anything in space. "Admiral, we're receiving reports from all fronts," announced Commander Tony Blake from his station. "The Vorthak are starting to pull back from some of our worlds. Their casualties are much higher than they expected." Lisa nodded grimly. She had been studying the battle. Reports for days, and a pattern was becoming clear. Humans didn't just fight to win battles. They fought to make sure their enemies never wanted to fight them again. "What's the status of Captain Morrison's mission?" she asked. "The Retribution is approaching Vorthak supply lines now, Admiral. They should begin their attack within the hour." Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching enemy cargo ships move supplies to the invasion fleets. His ship looked like a peaceful explorer, but it was actually one of the most dangerous vessels humanity had ever built. "Lieutenant Thompson, are the weapon systems ready?" Jake asked his tactical officer. Kate Thompson smiled as she checked her displays. The young woman who had once believed in solving everything with words now understood that sometimes you had to speak in a language your enemies could understand. "All systems green, Captain. The Vorthak won't know what hit them." "Chief Lou, how are our special modifications working?" Bobby Lou grinned from his engineering station. "Better than expected, sir. Those mining lasers cut through Vorthak armor like it's made of paper, and our cargo containers are loaded with enough surprises to ruin anyone's day. The attack began without warning. The retribution dropped out of faster-than-light travel right in the middle of the Vorthak supply convoy. What looked like a single exploration ship suddenly revealed itself as something much more dangerous. Mining lasers designed to cut through asteroids sliced enemy ships in half. Cargo containers opened to release swarms of missiles that had been disguised as scientific probes. The peaceful research vessel became a ship of war in seconds. "This is Captain Morrison of the United Earth Ship Retribution," Jake broadcast to the surviving Vorthak ships. "You attacked our colonies without warning. You killed our people while pretending to want peace. Now you get to learn why we stopped building ships like this one." The battle was over in minutes. The Vorthak supply convoy was completely destroyed, leaving their invasion fleets cut off from reinforcements and supplies. But Jake wasn't finished. His ship jumped to the next supply line, then the next one after that. Back on New Portland, Frank Mitchell received word that help was coming. The human military was finally mobilizing in full force, and reinforcements would arrive soon. But Frank wasn't planning to wait for rescue. "All right, people," he announced to his militia fighters. "We've been playing defense long enough. Time to show these aliens what happens when you mess with human families." The counterattack began at dawn. Humans who had been hiding in buildings and tunnels suddenly emerged from everywhere at once. They had spent weeks learning Vorthak tactics and weaknesses. Now they used that knowledge to hit the invaders where it hurt most. Dr. Amy Rodriguez, now serving as an intelligence officer, had provided detailed information about Vorthak psychology and culture. The aliens expected enemies to fight with honor, following rules of battle. Humans didn't care about honor. They cared about winning and protecting their people. Vorthak warriors found their communication equipment sabotaged by humans who looked like harmless technicians. Their weapons mysteriously stopped working after being serviced by helpful human mechanics. Their food supplies were poisoned by smiling human cooks who had been planning revenge for weeks. "These creatures have no honor," complained Sub-Commander Krelth to his commander. "They strike from shadows and use tricks instead of facing us in open battle. Honor is a luxury for those who can afford to lose," replied Frank Mitchell, appearing on the alien's communication screen. "You came to our world to kill our children. Did you expect us to line up and make it easy for you?" The Vorthak invasion of New Portland collapsed within days. The survivors retreated to their ships, but even space wasn't safe anymore. Human fighters that had been hidden in asteroid fields and abandoned stations struck at every Vorthak ship that tried to leave the system. Meanwhile, across human space, similar scenes were playing out on world after world. The species that the galaxy had known as peaceful mediators was revealing a different side of their nature. They still wanted peace, but they were willing to fight harder than anyone to get it. On the industrial world of New Chicago, factory workers had converted their entire manufacturing system to produce weapons in just 2 weeks. Manager Helen Cooper watched as the 1,000th missile rolled off the production line. 20 years ago, we made the same weapons to fight each other," she told her workers. "Now we make them to protect our families. Let's make sure the Vorthak remember the difference." The tide of war was turning, and everyone could see it. The Vorthak Empire, which had seemed so confident just weeks before, was now struggling to hold on to the worlds they had conquered. Their warriors were demoralized and confused by an enemy that refused to fight the way battles were supposed to be fought. War Commander Thexaval received increasingly desperate reports from his commanders. The humans weren't just defending their worlds anymore. They were launching counterattacks that seemed to come from nowhere. Their ships appeared out of empty space, struck without warning, then vanished before the Vorthak could respond. "How are they doing this?" Thexval demanded during another strategy meeting. "Our intelligence said they had no military fleet." "Perhaps our intelligence was wrong, War Commander," suggested Sub-Commander Krelth. "Perhaps these humans have been preparing for war all along." The truth was even worse than that. Humanity hadn't been preparing for war. They had been trying very hard to avoid it. But when forced to fight, they discovered that their peaceful skills translated perfectly to military strategy. Scientists who studied alien cultures became intelligence experts who knew exactly how to hurt those same aliens. Engineers who built exploration ships easily converted them into weapons of war. Diplomats who understood alien psychology used that knowledge to break enemy morale. The galaxy watched in growing amazement as humanity transformed from peaceful explorers to the most effective military force anyone had seen in generations. Species that had quietly mocked human weakness now began to worry about human strength. Admiral Carter received reports from across the war zone. Every single Vorthak attack had been stopped. Most of the invasion fleets were retreating in disorder. The aliens who had started this war by betraying human trust were learning a harsh lesson about human memory. "Admiral," reported Commander Blake, "we're receiving surrender requests from several Vorthak commanders. They want to negotiate an end to hostilities." Lisa Carter looked at the tactical display showing human forces advancing on all fronts. After weeks of desperate defense, they were finally winning. But the war wasn't over yet. There was still one more lesson the Vorthak needed to learn. "Tell them we'll accept their surrender," she said quietly, "after we finish what they started." 6 months after the first Vorthak attack, General Marcus Stone stood on the command deck of the human invasion fleet. Through the massive view screen, he could see Thexvala Prime, the homeworld of the Vorthak Empire. It was a red planet with 3 moons protected by the largest space fortress the galaxy had ever seen. "General, all fleet units are in position," reported Colonel Amy Rodriguez from her station. The former scientist had become one of humanity's best military strategists, using her knowledge of alien cultures to predict enemy moves before they happened. Marcus nodded slowly. The old soldier had waited 20 years for this moment, not because he wanted war, but because he knew that sometimes peace could only be secured through strength. "Signal all ships, begin the final assault." What followed was unlike any battle the galaxy had ever witnessed. The human fleet didn't charge forward like traditional attackers. Instead, they moved like a living thing, flowing around enemy defenses and striking at weak points with surgical precision. Captain Jake Morrison commanded a squadron of ships that officially didn't exist. The UES Retribution and her sister vessels looked like civilian cargo haulers on long-range sensors. But when they opened their hidden weapon bays, they revealed firepower that could crack planets. "All ships, this is Morrison," Jake broadcast to his squadron. "Remember, we're not here for revenge. We're here to end this war once and for all. Make every shot count." The Vorthak defenders fought desperately, but they were facing an enemy that had learned from every battle of the past 6 months. Human ships moved in patterns that seemed random, but were actually carefully calculated to confuse enemy targeting. Systems. They used weapons that looked like mining equipment and shields that pretended to be sensor arrays. Lieutenant Kate Thompson, now a major commanding her own ship, led a strike force against the orbital weapons platforms. Her vessel, the New Dawn, danced between enemy fire like it was performing a ballet. The young officer who had once believed words could solve everything now understood that sometimes actions spoke louder. "Target their power cores," Kate ordered her weapons officer. "We don't want to destroy the platforms completely. We want them to shut down so we can capture them intact." That was the difference between human warfare and Vorthak warfare. The aliens fought to destroy everything in their path. Humans fought to achieve specific goals with minimum destruction. They wanted to win the war, not annihilate their enemies. On the planet's surface, War Commander Thexvala watched his defenses crumble with growing despair. The humans weren't just defeating his forces, they were doing it while following rules of engagement that prevented unnecessary casualties. Even in their moment of total victory, they showed mercy to wounded enemies and protected civilian populations. "War Commander," reported one of his officers, "the humans are requesting a meeting. They want to discuss surrender terms." Thexavala's pride rebelled at the idea of surrender, but he was not stupid. His empire was broken, his fleet scattered, and his homeworld was under siege. The species he had dismissed as weaklings had proven to be the most dangerous enemies he had ever faced. "Tell them I will meet with their commander," he said finally, "but only if they guarantee safe passage for my surviving warriors." The meeting took place in the ruins of the Vorthak capital city. General Stone arrived with a small escort, walking calmly through streets that his forces had captured just hours before. War Commander Thexval waited in what had once been his throne room, now lit by emergency power and filled with the smoke of battle. General Stone of the Human Defense Corps, Marcus introduced himself, offering a salute that somehow managed to be both respectful and victorious. War Commander Thexval of the Vorthak Empire, the alien replied, his voice heavy with defeat. Though I suppose there is no empire left to command. Marcus studied his enemy for a moment. The proud warrior who had started this war by betraying human trust now looked old and broken. But there was still intelligence in those red eyes, and perhaps the beginning of understanding. There doesn't have to be, Marcus said quietly. The Vorthak Empire is finished, but the Vorthak people don't have to be. We're offering you a choice that you didn't offer us. Thexval raised his head in surprise. You would spare us, after everything we have done? We're not monsters, War Commander. We never were. You mistook our desire for peace as inability to wage war. But you also missed something else about us. We don't fight to destroy our enemies. We fight to protect our families and secure a lasting peace. The terms of surrender were simple but comprehensive. The Vorthak military would be disbanded, and their weapons destroyed. Worlds that had been conquered by the Empire would be freed and allowed to govern themselves. War criminals would face trial, but ordinary soldiers would be allowed to return home. Most importantly, the Vorthak themselves would be offered a chance to join the galactic community as equals, once they had proven they could live peacefully with their neighbors. Why? Thexval asked as he signed the surrender documents. Your people have the power to wipe us out completely. Why show mercy to those who showed you none? General Stone looked out through the broken windows at the city below, where human medics were treating wounded Vorthak soldiers alongside their own casualties. Because that's who we are. We didn't abandon our humanity when we remembered how to fight. We just learned once again that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is choose mercy over vengeance. 3 months later, President Elena Murphy stood before the reformed Galactic Coalition, addressing leaders from across the galaxy. The chamber was filled with species who had watched humanity's transformation with growing amazement and, in some cases, fear. Fellow beings, Murphy began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast hall. The recent conflict with the Vorthak Empire has taught us all valuable lessons. We have learned that peace is not weakness, and strength is not cruelty. She paused, looking out at the assembled representatives. Many of them were seeing humanity with new eyes, no longer the naive peacekeepers they had once dismissed. Humanity did not choose to become warriors again. That choice was forced upon us by those who mistook our kindness for weakness. But we want you all to understand something important. We did not abandon peace when we took up arms. We simply learned once again that sometimes peace must be defended with fire. Admiral Lisa Carter, now promoted to head of Human Defense Command, watched from the gallery as her president continued the speech that would reshape galactic politics. We offered friendship to those who would accept it. To those who chose violence, we became their reckoning. But the war is over now, and we return to our true nature. We seek peace, cooperation, and mutual understanding with all species willing to share those values. Murphy's voice grew stronger as she reached the heart of her message. But let this conflict serve as a reminder to anyone who might consider following the Vorthak path. Humanity keeps the peace precisely because everyone now knows what happens to those who break it. The applause that followed was subdued but respectful. The galaxy had learned something important about the species they had thought they understood. Later, as the coalition session ended, Murphy was approached by Ambassador Kelvin of the Zephyrian Trade Federation. The tall, blue-skinned alien had been one of those who quietly mocked human weakness in the past. President Murphy, Kelvin said carefully, I wanted to personally thank you for your restraint during the recent conflict. Many species expected you to respond more harshly to the Vorthak aggression. Murphy smiled, but there was steel behind it. Ambassador, we responded exactly as harshly as necessary to end the threat and secure peace. No more, no less. That's what separates civilization from barbarism. As she walked away, Murphy reflected on the changes the war had brought to humanity's place in the galaxy. They were no longer seen as naive peacekeepers, but they weren't feared as conquerors either. They had found something rarer and more valuable than either reputation. They were respected. The galaxy now understood that humanity's choice of peace came not from weakness, but from wisdom about their own capabilities. They had shown that the most dangerous species were often those who preferred not to fight, because when they finally did, they remembered exactly why they had been so good at it. And in the end, that understanding would keep the peace far better than any weapon ever could.